open your mind to the possibilities that there are many ways to do something. And it would seem if you told someone you could start with the drywall, they would say that was ridiculous. But if you see it, you're like, okay, that makes sense in this context.
I got to figure out how to put the paint down first, then the drywall on top of the paint.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by Associate Editor Matt Milham.
Hello.
Rob Watzak, Digital Brand Manager.
Hi.
And producer Jeff Rose.
Hello, everybody.
Please email us your questions at fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Thanks for being with me, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to start off today. You remember the discussion we had about mold and algae on siding and stuff like that?
You mean like 10 times? Yes, I remember.
The ceaseless conversation we had about mold and algae. So I tried one of the products. I used spray and forget on my house, and nothing happened for a while, but I'm starting to see results.
That's why you're supposed to forget about it.
I did.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wow, that's kind of looking better. And for a while, there was this like white residue on my tan siding. Mm-hmm. But that's rinsing off along with the residue that was the mold and algae that was there.
Did we ever figure out what like the safety concerns are with something like that? Or do they ever...
So I can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
Having drank a cup of it.
So inevitably, when you're working from a ladder and using a garden sprayer and spraying, you get sprayed a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I got it in my face. I probably breathed it. I was wearing my safety glasses, but I'm sure I probably got a little in my eyes. And it isn't somewhat of an irritant, but I would say it's no worse than any other cleaning product I've used. Mm-hmm. It has this kind of a citrusy acid smell that you sometimes get in industrial cleaning products. I still haven't figured exactly what it is, and I tried to look at the safety data sheets to determine what the compounds were that make it work, but I'm still in and I don't understand. Mm. But it seems to be working.
Good.
Yeah.
I got to try it on my house. The back of my house, same thing. It's almost the same color as yours.
I got a spray bottle you can borrow if you want.
I now have two 2-gallon Scott sprayers.
We're going to wear them both?
Things. Yeah,
I think you could spray with both
one
wands.
in each hand.
Oh my God, that'd be so cool.
Hang on my back.
I wasn't even thinking about the like the accessibility concerns. Like your house is not super tall. Well, you got the gable ends, but
the house is easy. The barn is not.
Yeah.
Right. The barn is tall.
So what would you do if you had a 40-foot tall house like I do?
I'd get a 40-foot ladder.
Yeah.
And
pump
the sprayer as much as I possibly could to get as much reach as I could.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you pressurize one of those with an air compressor maybe?
I don't know.
90 pounds?
I bought one that you can connect to a hose because I have to spray some trees because I got some fungal problems. And
I wouldn't use the spray and forget on the trees.
No, I'm not using that. I don't even remember what the product is. But yeah, because I was doing the same thing. I got up on a ladder, and this stuff you're not supposed to get on your
person,
skin, eyes at all. So I was like wearing a Tyvek suit up there.
Oh, yeah?
And it was still getting in my face, though.
Yeah.
And, the wind was going one way, and then all of a sudden it shifted, and I got a face full of this stuff. That was not fun.
I guess you just try and do that on the calmest day and wear the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I don't know what else you do. You could potentially get a man lift.
Yeah, that's not going to happen for me to spray in my house. Maybe put some scaffolding in the back of my pickup truck.
Leaning out the window.
Yeah, or maybe there's some sort of longer wand. Well, I don't know. I think we're talking
climb
too
up
much
on the
about
roof.
this, though.
Climb up on the roof.
On the roof?
Yeah, and spray down.
Okay.
What do you got to talk about?
I don't know, but I'm just tired of talking about spray pumps.
Fair enough. So what do you got?
I hate driving the same way to work twice. So today was a nice sunny day, and I took this backcountry road on my way here, and it's one of my favorite roads. It goes through this sleepy little town that's kind of a combination of old blue-collar farms and, New York City weekender homes. And it's it's fascinating when you drive through an area like that, especially when houses are spread apart. People feel a little bit more comfortable just doing whatever the heck they want with their property. You know, you don't have neighbors to complain like you do in a tight neighborhood like where I live. And you see some pretty interesting things on the sides of that people have done, especially on the older houses over the years. And I think we've got some pictures of some of this. But basically, so this cute little, I don't know, kind of like a Cape size house that was very simple, looked like a little farmhouse, and then just it looked like it has some kind of weird growth coming out of the corner of it.
It has a carbuncle on the side.
But it's like, you know, the house was probably built in the, I don't know, 1800s maybe. You can't really tell because so much stuff has been done to it. But then there's just this funny little turret just sticking out of the second floor.
And I don't know how you'd access it, right?
It looks like it must go into the house somehow, like in the corner of a bedroom. Maybe it's a little reading nook or something. But it's like somebody maybe in the Victorian era was like, you know, my house is pretty simple, but I really like those cool Victorian houses with their widow's walks down the street, and they kind of just
stuck
something on the side of their house.
What is it? The roof's covering?
It looks like just asphalt shingles.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's hard to do.
But basically, it looks like someone took the tower off of another house and just took like a chunk of it and just grafted it into the roof of their front porch.
And it looks like it backs right into that chimney. Like, I wonder how you get past that.
No, it's actually not as close as it looks. But the point is that, like...
the point is, how is it staying up is my point.
Yeah.
It's like bearing on the porch roof, which looks hopelessly underframed.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about something that obviously most people listen to the podcast can't see, but maybe they should go to the website and we'll have some photos of it there.
It's worth looking at.
But it made me think about...
so why do people do this?
Well, who knows?
Keeping up with the Joneses.
But what it made me think about is that, you know, as a carpenter, as a remodeler, you're asked to do a lot of things to old houses. And it's like, whose place is it to decide whether that's a good idea or not? I mean, it's like, you know, as people who know about the history of houses and are really care about high quality and good-looking details, it's like it's just fascinating to see the range of stuff that people think is a good idea to do to houses, and whether or not, you know.
I don't really have a problem with the turret. I have a problem with how it's constructed. It looks kind of dangerous.
Yeah, honestly, I kind of really love it, but it's but you know, you see how there are houses that maybe were really simple and elegant, and that people just decide to like totally mess them up, and I just wonder how many carpenters out there have to deal with
what
this.
What if this person is like watches the podcast? They're going to see their house and be like, "Hey, well, it's not very nice."
Like I said, no, I like this particular example.
I like this one too.
I like this one, but
what do you think aesthetically?
I think it's a really kind of interesting idea. I have no idea. Like, I'd really want to see what it looks like on the inside.
Totally.
Okay, you all have to go to the website and see this because we're talking way too much about something you can't see. But it's
and we can't describe it adequately no matter how we try. So,
but the thing is, it's like I'm sure that a lot of remodelers every day have to deal with customers asking for things, and it's like it's, you know, oftentimes it's up to the carpenter to figure out what the right way to do something like this is. Maybe kind of steer someone in the right direction. And that kind of rolled into a conversation I was having with Kylie today, our design editor, about the difficulties that architects or designers and builders or remodelers deal with, in that they often have very different priorities, very different perspectives, and often very different levels of talent.
Yeah,
but
and knowledge.
Yeah, and knowledge. And so sometimes it's just amazing to me that a lot of these projects actually come to completion, because, you know, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of miscommunication involved. I mean, I'm sure anybody who's been in the building trades for a long time can say that communication or miscommunication is really one of the biggest issues.
I was hanging out with a gentleman over the last couple of days whose entire job it is for a very large high-end remodeling firm is to prevent problems, fix problems, and then prevent those problems they fixed from being problems in the future. And it's like, that's his whole job, is quality control.
Michael Cohen?
What exactly is his job title?
I have no idea. But his name is Doug Horgan, and he's a regular presenter at the JLC live shows, and he's going to be an author or contributing to a piece in an upcoming feature we're going to do on job site protection. So that's why he was taking me around to these projects recently, and it was to show me how they keep their projects or keep their subs and tradespeople from messing up their clients' stuff, and to keep the construction process from messing up their clients' stuff.
Now, you probably have to have a pretty decent-sized business to have someone who's that has that responsibility, right?
Yes, they have dozens of employees. It's not 100, but definitely dozens. And it's a employee-owned firm, and they do a lot of very high-end work in the D.C. area. They currently have 18 projects going on at the same time.
I wonder how you get into that employee-owned situation, because that South Mountain Company, I believe, is an employee-owned.
Yes, I don't know,
Nantucket.
but it is.
I mean, Martha's Vineyard, right?
It seems like a good way to encourage people to stay with your company for a long time because they share in its success, and I suspect they are paid better than most hourly wage carpenters. But it's an interesting model, and I think it gives everyone a stake in the company. I think it works what I've seen of it.
Yeah.
What were we talking about again? Architectural follies.
Yeah. There was one other picture that I think I had of one. This is kind of a little more subtle. It was.
I like this.
Yeah, someone has an old farmhouse, one of those sort of 1.5-story farmhouses, with a couple little dormers on the front, and very classic kind of brick red. Just kind of blends in nicely with the landscape. And they built a garage that kind of looks like a barn with unfinished pine siding on it.
So the barn is newer?
Yeah. I think it's newer. It doesn't look from the other side like an actual barn. And then they decided, well, we want to connect these two, and they put this fascinating breezeway. And you see this a lot in kind of maybe it's common everywhere, but in some of the wealthier outlying rural areas in the metropolitan areas where there's money and there's people with different design senses, where you see this kind of modern aesthetic creeping into some of the old
I don't think it
farmhouse.
creeped into this project.
Yeah.
This is like dropped there.
Yeah, so it's like a bronze-colored glass enclosed breezeway with a barrel-shaped standing seam metal roof.
So I love the roof because it allowed them to leave the windows on the original house structure. The roof doesn't interfere with the way the windows are arranged. I think that was a pretty elegant solution.
Yeah.
But so how do you guys feel about adding modern details to classic homes like that? I mean,
I don't know. I think it could be really cool. There was actually a farm right down the street from where I used to live, and it was also an old farmhouse, probably built in the 1800s. And they had a stone addition off the back. I don't know exactly what was in there. It's kind of a bed and breakfast now. But it had a similar barrel vault roof on it with standing seam. It looked very similar to this, just much larger.
Bigger, yeah.
Yeah, but I think the stone of that building just blended really nice with the old farmhouse, and even though the rest of it looked, the roof and the windows looked really modern, it really just popped. It really just beautified the whole space, I think, in a way that the house itself, if that addition weren't there, wouldn't have.
I like to think of these as a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. This one I think works pretty well because it's not too loud.
Yeah.
It's modern and it's progressive design, but it's not in your face.
yeah, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about on that episode. We were talking about the old way of seeing, that book about people who understood proportions and how their elements of their environment interact with each other. And I think it's really just about finding details or proportions or materials that go well together. I mean, I actually really like modern stuff too, but I really love the old houses. So as long as you get the details right, I think it can work.
So you saw all these kind of eclectic architectural styles on your way to work this morning?
Yeah, it was all. There's this one road in Bridgewater, Connecticut, and
is it an affluent area?
Well, you know what it is. It's a lot of kind of gentleman farms. I think it's a lot of weekend homes and
Folks from Manhattan, probably.
Mm-hmm. But and there's plenty more like it. It's one of my favorite roads because there's just so many different examples of people doing interesting things.
I think that you should consider starting architectural tours.
Yeah.
How many people can you fit in your Honda Element?
Yeah.
You could put seats on the roof of it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just put some bench seats in the back of my old pickup truck.
I would totally sign up for that.
Yeah, a little canopy.
A pickup truck tour?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Put some suicide seats back there.
I'm signing up. Rob's a good driver.
Okay. Thanks.
What do you have? What have you been doing? You were on a photo shoot this week.
Yeah, sort of the space. There was an addition on this house, or they wanted to put an addition, like a sunroom on the back of this house, and they had no way of getting sort of like big machinery back there because the septic was on one side, so you couldn't drive like machinery over that.
Yep.
And on the other side, it was all gardens and stuff, and they didn't want that ruined. So
They flew it in.
Yeah, so they flew it.
Airlift.
So they were, he was building this thing sort of on piers, sort of like you would do a deck.
Yep.
But he wanted to be able to air seal the floor underneath and get it, really.
That's a detail we is a struggle to get correct.
Yeah. So he basically built this thing off the ground. Well, built the framing for the floor system and then raised it up and then sheathed underneath of it with zip, taped it, and then lowered it back down.
Cool.
And it actually went really quickly.
How did he lift
Surprisingly
it
fast.
and lower it?
Some material lifts, just little hand crank material lifts. Just put one on either side, sort of strong backs on either end of it, and just lifted it up.
What's a material lift?
They basically it's like a tiny little forklift that you operate by hand. It has two little arms, and so he had one on each side and just kind of locked it in and pulled
Presumably
it up.
this wasn't a very big addition.
No, but I mean, these things, I think they handled about 1,000 pounds a piece, and I mean,
The floor system's
a
not
floor
heavy.
system isn't that heavy.
Wow, cool.
Yeah,
What a great idea.
yeah.
So how high did he raise it? Enough to stand under it?
Yeah, enough to stand under it so they could, sheath it
Cool.
without having to struggle too much.
So they framed the entire floor
The box.
system sitting on the piers or on the ground?
Yeah, sitting on, they had built like a PT foundation sort of on top of the,
Oh, okay.
yeah, on top of the concrete piers. So that was all leveled and everything. And then they built this floor system on top of that, raised it up, sheathed it, lowered it back down. It went
then it's
super
business as
fast.
usual.
And then, then you just frame as normal.
Nice.
Yep.
So now we had an article in a recent issue. I think was it one of not South Mountain's projects? Was it that house that was like a
The Kylie
yeah.
covered in.
Yeah, it was like this sort of angled little cottage that was also built on piers, and they had to deal with similar situations. But I feel like they actually built it in reverse. Like they figured out a way to sort of suspend the sheathing layer from below the rim joists with some lightweight, almost additional framing, and then they just built up from there. Does that sound right?
I don't remember.
I'll have to take a look at that because it was pretty fascinating. Obviously, if you're building something high enough, you can just get underneath there and
Did you know?
Put the smallest guy on your crew under there.
Right. Did you know that modular houses are built inside out? So they start with a layer of drywall on a table, and then they spray down adhesive, put the framing on top, and then they stand the walls. Yeah.
I wonder what's the draw there.
Because you're just putting down huge sheets of drywall and building the exact frame on top. You cut off the excess, and the thing is done. Right?
That's true because you got a smooth surface down,
yeah,
and then you can just keep working up because obviously your outer surfaces are going to be bumpy on a wall,
and then you get all your walls stood in the modules, and then you side when it's all done.
I think we need to go do a video on this.
So I've seen the process, and it's very interesting. It's probably good for people who are, site conventional stick builders to see this because it really does open your mind to the possibilities that there are many ways to do something. And it would seem if you told someone you could start with the drywall they would say that was ridiculous. But if you see it, you're like, okay, that makes sense in this context.
I got to figure out how to put the paint down first, and the drywall on top of the paint.
Oh man, it's like a wrap, right? You put down the film.
Yep.
Yeah,
like thermofoil.
Sweet. So, how long did that take them to lift that floor system and sheathe it and put it back down?
less than half an hour.
Are you kidding?
No.
Wow.
Yeah. It was only, 12 by 16.
Uh-huh.
So not gigantic.
Wow.
Yep. How many guys were working on it?
3. And 2 of the guys are very green.
Boy, that's the way I've been seeing it lately.
Yep.
And the crew I was visiting this past week, they were saying that, guys who are carpenters are now running job sites because the labor shortage is so acute. Mm-hmm. They need their own people to be on the job, but they have to watch the people who are doing the work like hawks, and it's challenging.
That's an interesting thing in a bunch of the different jobs I've worked at over the years, whether it be cabinet shop installation jobs or remodeling, restoration jobs, is one of the skills that I felt like it was most important for me to hone as a lead carpenter was being able to quickly evaluate the skill level for the task at hand of the people that I was working with, and especially when you've got multiple people working on a job site
and you don't know them,
and it's like I can't think of a more important skill as a job site manager, a lead carpenter.
Assign the right job to the right person.
Yeah, and knowing how much time you can give and how much room you can give before you have to circle back around and check on what the progress is.
That was pretty much the entire job site experience as my job as a construction supervisor for Habitat, was quickly assessing who knew anything, put them with people who didn't, and then know when to come back and make sure they weren't messing something up. That was that was the job. Yeah,
and I imagine, especially when you're working with some seasoned pros and some green help, that the seasoned guys, in a perfect world, I would think a lot of them want to be working with other seasoned guys so they can just get into a rhythm and move faster. But then, how do you get new help? You gotta always pair up the.
You learn to not assume anyone has any knowledge about anything. Like you cannot take anything for granted. At least in the job I had, and that prevents mistakes. That's the only way to prevent them, is just to spell everything out every time.
And that even transfers from task to task, because, someone can be a really smart person, but it's amazing how the subtle differences between what is apparently similar work situations can completely trip somebody up compared to something that they just kind of get into a rhythm and move with.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Anything will trip them up.
So just before we get on to any questions, I would remind people that we were at JLC a couple of weeks ago, and we did 3 podcasts there. We out
of the normal rotation too. So if you're not looking for them, you might not find them, right?
Yeah. So this is podcast number 175.
Correct.
And so those were 171, 2, and 3, and it was 3 fascinating little interviews we did. It was kind of abbreviated. It wasn't as big of a production as we did at the International Builders Show in Vegas. We were at the JLC Live show in Providence, Rhode Island, and we got to talk to the CEO from Stabila and one of his colleagues, which was kind of fascinating, looking at the history of that company. And
they were, I'm pretty sure, our first international guests.
Yeah.
So we're multinational now.
Multinational.
Did you know that?
I didn't.
Yeah. I'm going to brag about it every time.
Actually, I did kind of know we were international. When I was in Ireland last year, Fine Homebuilding was on the shelf in a bookstore I went into.
No way.
Yeah.
What do we have in common with Irish construction practices?
I don't know that we have anything in common with them.
Don't they just build with rocks and plaster over there, pretty much?
Oh, thank you for offending all the Irish listeners. That's good. It's peat, right?
Yeah.
Fine peat building.
Stacked peat. That's it.
No, they heat with peat, don't they?
Yeah. At least they used to. Actually, it's all over the place. You see piles of peat.
I think their energy policy is really progressive now. But peat is sustainable.
Yeah.
It grows every year.
Yep.
What were we talking about?
I think we're getting some questions.
Okay. How about on to the questions?
Kurt writes, I'm looking at a deck upgrade on an existing 20-year-old deck. We want to widen the stairs, currently 30 inches, and replace the decking. I plan to use the composite decking material, but my question is regarding rebuilding the stairs. This is good. We have a sawdust question today. I haven't built deck stairs over 4 treads. I've used 2x12s and cut them for stringers in the past, but I am leery of stringers this long and high with so many cuts. As you can see in the original picture, these stringers are solid 2x material with 2x4 cleats as tread supports. So he has what we describe as closed stringers, and the cleats hold up the treads from underneath. The new treads will be 4 feet wide, so there will be at least one more stringer, if not 2, which will have to be cut, but wondering what the best approach is overall. Are there exterior rated LVLs I could cut for this? If the lumber seems good on the existing stringers, it would be nice to reuse them. I also thought a post and new concrete pier might be a good addition to support where the stairs connect to the deck beam, but that might be overkill. Well, who wants to go first?
You could use, I mean, he could, if he knows how to use a router, he could do some house stringers similar to what he has there.
Outdoors, though, Matt?
Yeah, why not?
You think that's going to trap water and debris and rot?
I don't know.
I think it is. That's my take, anyway.
I mean, caulk it. Just make sure you put some copper naphthenate on your
On
cuts.
the cuts.
Yeah.
What's your approach to stairs outdoors?
Oh, outdoor stairs kind of intimidate me, just like they are intimidating this guy, because like he was saying, you're cutting long stringers, so you're basically taking a bulk of the material out of there. I mean,
yeah, you end up with what amounts to about a 2x6 left after you cut the notches for the treads and risers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I try to strike a balance between being lazy and overkill.
Okay.
I mean,
I think that's the right approach.
Yeah, looking at the span of his deck and his staircase,
those suckers are long.
I feel like I would love to have some extra supports in the middle. So
the solution to those super long stringers is to put an intermediate support post with a beam on top that all the stringers bear on, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, I hadn't read these notes before we got in here, so I didn't look it up. And usually you guys are the ones who are all about codes and specifications. So I'm sure there's a table we can look up to figure out what kind of span he's got going here and where those posts should be.
So the thing to look at is the DCA6, which is the document that the code is based on. It's designed for code acceptance, and this one involves decks. And deck stairs are covered on pages 20 and 22 in the 2015 version of this document. So it gives you real good guidance on how to build them the safe way.
Yeah, I knew Patrick would have the answer to this one.
Well, if it's deck related, DCA 6 is the thing to look at always as a first start. So that's what I would say. And I like notch stringers. I don't like the cleats. I think they trap dirt. I think they're hard to clean. But you need more support if you're going to cut that much wood out of the 2x12.
Yeah, I mean, on an outdoor stair, I mean, sometimes the look of the
closed
stringers is nice, but yeah, the key to doing anything that lasts outdoors is to not create pockets for water and debris,
dirt to get into.
And but yeah, it's.
And I think that stringers should be 12 inches on center for outdoor stairs, and it's because inevitably there's going to be 2 people carrying a refrigerator or a front-loading washer up these things, right? And it's going to be a ton of weight.
Yeah.
And, I see it often where people do the closed stringers with those cleats like that, and especially in an outdoor location, a lot of people aren't using the right fasteners, or even if there is, it's tough to find an acceptable way to attach a cleat that's going to support a
tread,
a stair tread.
Yeah.
So the notched stringers is really the safest way
and you're
going
to have to make notched ones anyway, as you point out, Kurt. So, like, once you make that's one, it's super easy to make as many more as you need.
Yeah. You
use it as a template. And Andy Engel has a book, and it's on our website, and he has articles on how to build stairs. So I would say consult that on the very basics of stair building, and you will be really proud of yourself when this is done, I guarantee, because there's nothing more satisfying than building a set of sturdy stairs. I've done it once or twice. Do you think we answered this question adequately?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically it's go to the resource, get the specs to get to do it right for the span that you've got.
As far as I know, there are no pressure-treated LVL materials, and there might be an LSL, which is looks more like OSB type material. There's definitely PSL, which is parallel strand lumber, which is posts and outdoor beams that they make out of this material, but you're going to find it's ridiculously expensive for making a set of stringers and too thick. I think it's 3 inches. So,
yeah, I mean, I could understand the hesitation to tackle the job of cutting stringers if you've never done it before, and then also the hesitation to add a post, particularly in places like up north where we have deep frost depth, and you got to dig a big hole.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome digging a 4-foot hole.
Yeah, but well hey, at JLC, weren't you admiring some of those different column systems there, the footing systems?
So I heard from a gentleman who builds in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. What's his name, Kevin or Keith?
Keith, I believe.
Keith. But he was telling me about his lumberyard sells precast concrete piers with a footing on the bottom and a hole in the top for an eye bolt that you can lower with a machine. You can't; they're too heavy to pick up. But
yeah,
if you could get the machine to put this in the hole, that would seem like an ideal thing to do here.
Well, and what he was saying too is that once you have several of these things on a job, the added cost of renting a small machine,
no big deal,
is worth it because you're ready to build the second those things go in the ground. If those things are a rated footing with the correct marking on it, he said sometimes he doesn't even need to have a footing inspection for them, and
it's fast,
especially on a sloped site like this deck we were just looking at had kind of an unusual site where getting a cement mixer or getting materials up there would just be nice to just be able to drop something in the hole and be done with it.
Totally. Alternatively, Ryobi is now selling at the Home Depot a portable concrete mixer that Rob has been trying out. Right, Rob?
Well, not quite yet. I was waiting for some warmer weather.
So anyway, this thing is like the size of a big washing machine, wouldn't you say? It probably holds 2 or 3 bags of concrete.
It actually kind of looks like it's made out of washing machine parts. I mean, it looks like it's a big, lightweight steel
and it has
tub.
wheels on it, and it comes apart to move.
And I actually own a portable concrete mixer already that's this big cast iron drum. It holds like 2 bags.
Cast iron?
Yeah, I believe it's cast iron. It's heavy, or at least it's got cast iron gears or parts on it, but it's a big, heavy steel drum, and it's got big, heavy angle iron, and it only tilts back and forth, and it's heavy and cumbersome. This Ryobi one, I haven't used it with the load of concrete in it, but the neat thing about it is it rotates and pivots so that if you're working in a tight location, you don't have to keep shuffling the base around when you're trying to get into the hole.
It seems well made.
Yeah.
I will say it's got a nice DC motor on it with a switch that's in a rocker switch is in a little protective thing so you don't get concrete into it, and it's
yeah. I'll hopefully in the next week or a couple weeks, and now that the weather's warm, I'll test it out on some of my projects and I'll check back.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear because I was super excited to see a concrete mixer for I think it's under $300.
One while we're on the footing thing though, before we go, what do you think about the helical piers for something like this? Is it worth it?
It's not inexpensive. It gets less expensive the more you're doing. I think for doing 2, that would be required for this would be prohibitively expensive, but It is a fantastic product.
Now, what's the company that you've dealt with one of those companies before, right?
Techno Metal Post.
So I was talking to some of those guys at JLC Live about how I had a project that only had a couple of posts, and they were saying that because they have an area where they work, if you're not in a hurry for a small project, they can often kind of hop to your job after they're working on another job in the area.
So that's good to know. Yeah.
So that might cut down the cost.
Because obviously much of the expense is bringing the machine to the job site, and, the cost of that is higher the fewer you're doing.
Yeah. In some places, it's just about the only way to go. Like my neighbors are planning on building steps down a steep hill to the river behind us, and there's no way. Well, it's not even just a matter of getting a machine down there to pour concrete, but it's an old hillside that people have been dumping leaves and brush on for so many years.
Yeah, and you can't.
We have no idea how far they'd have to dig before they even hit something.
No idea what the bearing capacity of that soil is going to be.
Yeah, and the nice thing about those helical piers is that the machine actually measures the tension as it's putting them in, right? So that
it extrapolates it into bearing.
It knows how much pressure it can hold.
Yeah. It's super cool technology. Jeremy, my Facebook buddy, just recently completed a really long boardwalk in a conserved wetlands. And how else are you going to do that?
Yeah.
It's like you're going to bring an excavator into conserved wetlands and dig piers. You can't certainly put the boardwalk on mud.
and most of the time they drive those things with like an auger attachment on a back, like a bobcat, or they even have those little walk behind.
Yeah, his is a walk behind. It's a tiny machine.
But I was asking about these steep hillside applications where you can't even get an excavator down there, and he said they have
they'd hook it to something and winch it down.
Well, they actually have what is basically a giant impact driver that they hook up to one of those compressors that you run a jackhammer off of, and so they can get pretty much anywhere now with those things.
That is so cool. Technology is going to be our only hope for human salvation. Oh, this is Kevin from Sacramento. Hi, all. I enjoy listening to your podcast and would appreciate any help you can provide with my conundrum. That's what we specialize in, right, guys?
Conundrums.
Making them.
I am currently moonlighting as an owner-builder in an effort to construct a new construction 2-story house for my wife and myself in the Sacramento Valley. I finally reached a point in the construction process where I believe I need a laser. The task at hand is measuring the length for studs to build a stem wall that will match up in height to a concrete stem wall that doubles as a retaining wall. The issues at hand are I don't know what else I will use a laser for and what type of laser to get. I'm trying to decide between a PLS 180, PLS 6, and PLS 480. My first question is, what are the realistic uses for a laser in a new construction project? Everything. Everything. Absolutely everything. So far, I've determined that I could use the laser for measuring the aforementioned studs, installing trim work, and lining up tile and can lights. All of these are valuable and can be done with a PLS 180, but I'm wondering if I'm overlooking anything. Okay. Are you familiar with these tools?
So I didn't go and look at the specs of these particular three before we came in here.
Do you know these particular?
I don't know these particular ones, but I mean, just levels in general. I mean, like any kind of cross-line level, you can use them for all kinds of stuff. I mean, hanging cabinets, hanging pictures.
Think of it this way, Kevin. If you want to make a plumb line, or you want to make a vertical, or a plumb line, or a level line, there's a certain type of laser for that, right? You can also do 3D square, right? So that's what your conundrum is do you need the capability to make things square, like a foundation, like partition walls to a long exterior wall? If you need that kind of three-dimensional interpretation, you need the PLS 480. The other things are going to make either cross lines with a plumb and horizontal line, or they're going to have dots in the similar two-dimensional axes, right? Either level or plumb.
Yeah, I mean, I've mostly used the kinds that have the crosshair lines, so you can get plumb or level or both, and even some of them you can even lock, so that you just need a straight line in any orientation. You can lock the laser and then just use that as a straight edge. And but yeah, the additional feature of finding square on the ground like that sounds like a nice thing. So you don't have to. Right, and it also has the 3, 4, 5 triangles.
It has a plumb dot, right? So you can put a point in space, right? My house needs to be at this corner, right? And then you can put the PLS 480 on that and project out lines. And you can do them like 100 feet if you have a detector, and that's something to talk about. His part of his question is like, how useful are these things outdoors? And very is the answer. Even these tiny lasers can measure great or be accurate to great distances with a detector that reads the laser line or level line.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you're doing site work or large foundation work, having the kind with the detector is a great feature to have, because, even as powerful as the lasers are nowadays,
you can't see them outside.
You can't see them outdoors
in bright daylight.
Yeah, so I mean,
so my solution is, if you don't have a detector and you're working on your own project, especially, is I go out and I even laid out my barn at dusk. Right? Because I can use my cheapy $100 cross-line laser, and I set all the piers, as an example, the elevations for that with that tool. And I would never be able to do that in bright sunlight, but when it's, twilight, it works fantastic. So if you get creative, and the kits often include this little target, and for the longest time, I didn't know what to do with it, right? So it's this thing you put on your tape measure or on a stick, and somehow even in bright sunlight, when you use it, the line shows up on the target when you can't see it, and I don't know what's going on there.
You'd see it if you stared right at the laser.
It's some sort of pattern or reflective material or something like that.
It seems to have like some kind of mirror behind it, and it helps magnify the laser line in sunlight, and that works pretty good too. And Andy Engel, who I credit a lot of my knowledge with, taught me how to use that thing. He's like, yeah, it works pretty good.
So the key to answering this question here, though, is that one, how many of these different types of jobs and how big are some of the projects that he's going to be involved in are there? Like, is he doing site work? Is he doing large foundation work?
His walls are already laid out. So,
yeah. So also, how much does he really just want to buy cool tools compared to how much does he want to just save money on something he might only use once?
So the prices are different, right? The more capability you have, the more expensive it's going to be. And so obviously the budget is a huge consideration, but these things have really come down in price. And red lasers are cheaper than green. Do you know why people want green lasers, either of you guys?
No. To point at the stars, I've seen that happen.
Yeah. They're really bright.
They're easier to see.
Yeah.
The human eye can see green much better than red. So especially for those of us who are on the downhill side of life, they're easier to see, but they are more expensive. So for example, the PLS 180, which is a cross-line laser, it doesn't have the square function. Those start at like $170. And the kit, which includes a ceiling mount, which is what people use for drop ceilings, right, to put the track in. That's a fantastic tool for that particular task. The kit is like $400.
Can you imagine how much easier it is to do drop ceilings with a laser than the way they must have done them?
So they used to use a water level, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, once you got a few runners up, it would get easier. But yeah, it would have been a big pain, and it would have taken two people. So that's why that's ideal. And then the PLS6, which includes lines and points. The difference between a line and a point is how long a distance you can use it over, right? A point laser will show up much further away than a line. It's just because the beam is concentrated. The way an engineer explained it to me one time is like, lasers are always points. It's a diode that's making a laser beam shoot out, right? But if you imagine a garden hose that's water's flowing out of it and you put your thumb on it, you can make a stream of water that's longer. That's how a line laser is generated.
So you have to put your thumb over the laser?
You put your thumb over the red laser.
There's a tiny little guy in there.
And then shoots it out the side then in an arc.
So basically there's some sort of a prism or reflector in there.
It's a reflector on the top.
Yeah.
And it's shaped like you'd imagine with a point. Mm-hmm. And then, the red version of that is $324, and then the kit for that is $531, and that includes a laser detector, right, which is as we said, a pretty useful thing. And the green kit is $630, so it's a premium. Finally, the PLS 480, which is the one that does plumb, level, and square, and has a plumb point for reference, that sells for $360 as a bare tool or $525 as the kit. So given how little difference there is in price between that and the PLS 6, I would say if you have the $100, get the PLS 480. Otherwise, a cross-line laser is extremely useful, especially for like interior stuff where you're not doing like layouts over huge spaces.
Yeah, I mean, especially if he's an owner builder who's not going to be doing this, lots and lots of times. It's like whatever the inconveniences are or the limitations are of the cheaper laser, if he's really concerned about budget, he could probably do just fine with the.
You could also sell it. Like
That's
a good
true.
one, and then just
You'll sell
or
it in
Craigslist.
15 minutes.
What's that new tool sharing service? It's the Uber of tools.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called.
Yeah, maybe
they
he
were
could-
talking about it at the Builder Show.
Maybe he could even make more money than he paid for the thing on.
I tell you what, having a laser has been
renting it
a great addition to my life. It is something I use a lot, and it is supremely useful. And I think it makes you a better builder
Yeah.
because you're leveling and plumbing over longer distances.
And there, like you said, there's so many different instances where the thing could be useful. Like this isn't a home building thing, but I was laying out a tabletop that I wanted to build in the metal shop the other day, and I was like, I should just draw this on the floor. And so I just shot the laser on the floor and put some masking tape down and spray painted the edge of that. And I was starting to use it just like a sheetrock square, and I was like, no, this is stupid. I'm just grabbing my laser.
I don't think you'll regret buying a laser, Kurt. It's totally a fantastic tool.
And this is a perfect opportunity for us to try to get some more feedback from our listeners. So please email.
Yeah, what do you use your laser for?
What you use it for,
Yeah.
which one you prefer,
So I actually have, I don't think it's made anymore, but it's a Stanley Fat Max. And this thing was meant to be more in the advanced DIY product category. And it was like $100. And I tell you what, it's, like I said, I laid out the foundation piers from my barn with it, and they were perfect.
Yeah, that's actually the first model I had too, that Stanley Fat Max one. It's about the size of a Fat Max tape measure, and so you just keep it in your tool bag and use it all the time.
And the thing is, like, if it gets dropped or destroyed somehow, it's not a tragedy, right? It's just what happens. All right, HVAC question. You guys ready? This is kind of a long one.
Yep.
This comes from Scott. Hi, FHB pod team. Thanks for the great show. Been listening since episode 1. Thanks for listening, Scott. We currently plan to replace our current HVAC system. It's forced air with an older atmospherically vented oil-burning furnace and a traditional 3-ton central AC unit. The house is in eastern Massachusetts. It's a single story. It's about 1,700 square feet, built in the 40s. It has an unfinished basement and attic. We had an energy audit when we first bought the place, and they came in and air sealed the attic and basement, as well as blowing in some insulation into the attic. I have a PV solar array in the roof that is currently generating a little more electricity than we're using. The home is shaped like a U with a deck in the middle, the kitchen in the base of the U, and the family room on one end. The master bedroom is on the other. In the winter, the current comfort is okay, but as you might suspect, the bedroom and family room on the ends of the U tend to be a bit chilly compared to the rest of the house. I suspect the comfort issue has more to do with the duct system design than it does with the type of system, but it now seems like the time to address all of it. You've stressed on the show before the need to get a manual JA load calculation done. That seems like a good idea, but it also appears that being an existing house, lots of assumptions are going to be made about what's in the walls, the performance of the windows, etc. Just wondering if all those assumptions are made, how much different is that from a rule of thumb guess an experienced HVAC guy is going to make? Let's answer that question first, Rob.
Well, so...
And I say Rob because you probably have a lot to say about this.
Well, the thing is, the phrase that jumps out at me is an experienced HVAC guy. Like, that's just a very vague description of the person that you're working with. And that's the thing, is like HVAC, I feel like it seems to be one of the most challenging things to spec in a house, because you're dealing with varying heat losses depending on windows and insulation quality and shape and size of the spaces. So it just seems to me that it's smart to do as much math as possible in this kind of a situation. It's like,
Absolutely. It's all based on math. It's about heat loss, heat gain, and you try and make the equipment make up for the heat loss and the respective heat gain. It's a total numbers thing.
And he even says, I suspect the comfort has more to do with the system or duct design than it does with the type of system. And I think that's pretty much true. It's like one of the reasons why people use a rule of thumb is because they're typically oversizing a system just to make sure they don't have callbacks.
Yeah.
And
what do you tell somebody who's heating plant doesn't make enough heat.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you're just going to have to wait till it gets warmer. It gets warmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, especially because this is an unusual shaped house, it's a U-shaped house. So,
That's a challenge.
So, I mean, I've been in houses like this where people have spec'd mini splits with units on the wall to deal with the fact that it would be tough to get ductwork to certain parts of the house. But these were houses that had slab on grade foundation, so they just didn't have anywhere to go with running ducts. But
ductwork is big, and that makes it hard to run in a finished house, right? It's very difficult to retrofit ductwork.
But so I would imagine that if you got a mechanical engineer that specializes in HVAC, or an HVAC company that has a qualified person to do manual J and really high quality duct layout design, that you're going to find that they could probably work with the existing ducts if they're in decent shape and reroute some things and tap in places, and it probably, I would guess, has a lot to do with fine tuning how that ductwork is laid out and how the thermostats are laid out.
Yeah, and I mean, at a minimum, if you just replace the equipment, they're going to commission a good HVAC outfit will commission the system and make sure that the airflows are the same at the furthest parts of the run, the ends of your house, as they are at the in the center, close to the equipment, and that takes some doing. It takes hours to get that correct, and sometimes you can't fix some things if there's just the ducts are too small or improperly routed or too many bends or whatever. It's impossible to balance the system, so you may need to rework some or all of the ductwork, but a good system design will include that as part of it.
Yeah, and a good HVAC installer should have the equipment that they need to go around and measure the airflow on all those ducts, and it just seems like an obvious choice.
It's going to be expensive to design the system, and you might ask, is this worth it? And a lot of the HVAC companies that are just going to swap the equipment with something new are not going to. They're going to tell you it's not worth it, and there's little to be done anyway, but there's no way of knowing that unless you have someone who knows what they're doing to look at the system and measure the airflows and talk about your comfort. And there might be other things you can do to improve the comfort of those ends that are far from the heat source.
I mean, we don't know what the condition of these ducts are. It may just be a matter of
sealing.
Them need some duct sealing done. And
given the home's age, that's, I would say, a certainty.
Sure.
Move the thermostat to the coldest part of the house and open a window in the hottest part.
I love your philosophy.
I think we talked about this. I used to live in an apartment where we actually had a thermostatically controlled fan in the window to cool off our apartment in the wintertime because my landlord had one loop through the entire building and our part was insulated and his wasn't.
Oh, man. I bet he loved you guys.
It was his choice.
Yeah. So he has some other questions. So the first thing is get someone who knows what they're doing to look at the ductwork, design the system, and then do what they say with another company. Generally, the person who designs it is not going to be the one who's installing it. If I'm going to replacing the whole smash, what would you replace it with? Traditional single zone, high efficiency gas furnace, ground source heat pump, high efficiency low temp air source heat pump, or mini splits? Mini splits mounted on the wall?
Well, he says no mini. He says not on the wall. He doesn't like the look of that.
Right. So he's talking about like ducted mini splits because he says mini splits mounted on the wall are a no-go. Just too darn intrusive, i.e. ugly. That's a common sentiment I've heard. Would ducted mini splits mounted in the basement in different areas make any sense? Does anyone even install these? Yes, they do, and yes, it might make sense to put them in the basement.
So we had a webinar a few months ago. Run by some. It wasn't actually. It was sponsored by Mitsubishi, but it was run by a few different experts who were designing systems, and they were talking about how it really is a case by case basis, based on where you are, what type of house, what the layout is, what your needs are, what your comfort needs are, and they laid out plans for a bunch of different systems. Some of them were hybrid systems where they were ducted and not ducted, depending on certain locations in a house. Some were ducted mini splits where you're having head units that go to a couple of rooms that are adjacent to each other, so you have a minimum of ducts. And some of them were just full on ducted, high-performance, newer units. I mean, we're kind of focusing on the duct design right now, but as old as this house is, we don't know how old that air conditioner unit he has. If he just replaced it with the newest variable rate equipment that they have now, that might be enough. But this is something you got to talk to an experienced HVAC person to figure out.
Yeah, and when you ask what would I do, you guys probably know me by now. I'm cheap. I would buy a gas furnace and central AC. I would just make sure that the ductwork was sized appropriately and the system was commissioned and the equipment was sized correctly, and that's what I would do. I think you'll find a ground source heat pump is ludicrously expensive. I think the mini splits would be too, but it might be worth exploring.
But the one thing that he did say, though, is that he has a photovoltaic array that's producing an excess of 1,500 kilowatt hours. So
that's part of the matrix.
So where did he say he was located? Did he say
Mass, Eastern Mass?
In some parts of the country, switching to a high performance heat pump that's ducted in the house, especially with that solar array, might actually be enough. If his existing duct systems could support it. I mean, I've said, I'm running my whole house on, except for the couple of weeks in the winter where I run my pellet stove, my house is 100% heat pump, heating and cooling all the time.
What'd your system cost and how many heads?
So I've got a 30,000 BTU system with one outdoor unit and three indoor heads, two 9,000 BTU and one 18,000 BTU indoor head. So obviously the head units add up to more than the system can produce.
But the theory is that they're not all using all of their capacity at once.
Yes.
I gotcha.
And so that system installed, I believe, cost me about $10,000 or $11,000, which sounds like a lot for an HVAC system that's just a couple of head units and an outdoor unit. But the thing is, it's using no more power in the cooling season than one of my window units was using in the house.
Unfortunately for him, that's a non-starter, but that it gives people an idea what they can expect to pay.
Sure.
So he's going to be paying more because the ducted units are more expensive, and you need to assemble ductwork and route it and what have you.
They do have the recessed units too, which is sort of in between having a ducted units, and so they look like a big heating grill in the wall or the ceiling.
On that subject of cost, I'm betting you're going to for top of the line equipment, Carrier Green Speed or one of these modulating units you're talking about is going to be that much anyway. So,
yeah, you'll see a big difference in comfort and noise and energy efficiency just for the fact that all these newer units are modulating and they have variable speed pumps, compressors, fans. So where an old system is kicking on and off and on and off.
These are meant to run on low speed virtually all the time.
All the time. The fan is running 100% of the time on the head units because that's also how it senses the temperature in the room by drawing air in from the room.
Good question. What do you say, Matt? What would you do?
I have no idea what I would do there.
Would you put the ground source heat pump in?
No, I wouldn't do that.
I don't want to knock ground source heat pumps because I don't really know a whole lot about the details, but ground source heat pumps were first really popular when we didn't have air source heat pumps that could work in northern climates.
Yeah, and they work fine for commercial buildings with huge loads, but it's not the right size for all but the hugest houses.
There's definitely situations that work better for one or the other, but for compact heating systems that are standalone, the air source heat pumps, just the new systems seem to make a lot of sense.
I agree. That was a good show today, gentlemen. Thank you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thanks to Matt, Rob, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast and helps keep the light on. Thanks to everybody, and happy building.